Hey guys, Eric Tarr here for theproaudiofiles.com. In this video, I'll be discussing how to use the maximizer to bring up a mix to mastered level. So far, I've been using the iZotope Ozone 5 plugin to get my mix exactly how I want it prior to using a limiter. Here's what I've got so far.
Trouble bound, we hit the town. I'll never forget that sound.
In this video, I'll be demonstrating the maximizer section of the plugin and discussing some of the basics of loudness. I'll go ahead and switch on the module here. To begin with, I'll be focusing on the limiter section of the module, and then in my next video, I'll move on and discuss dithering. Now, one of the most well-known aspects of mastering is that it's used to bring up the overall level or loudness of a track so that it can be played side by side with another song you might hear on the radio, on CD, or even download to your computer. This is done primarily by controlling the dynamics of your track. Now, I've already done some of this kind of processing using a compressor earlier on in my signal chain. Now here at the end of my mastering signal chain, I'm going to be using a limiter to really bring up the level, but make sure I'm never clipping the signal at any point in time. The limiter inside of Ozone is one of the best that's out there. It has many different advanced algorithms to pick and choose from, and also a lot of different controls to make it very versatile. However, one of the things to know about it is this module in particular can be very CPU intensive. So if you've got a session like mine where you're mixing with all these different kinds of plugins, going into Ozone with all these other modules going, it can actually cause problems for your CPU and playback to stop inside of your DAW. Now you can check this, at least in Pro Tools, by going up here to your System Usage tab, seeing how your CPU is doing. Right now I'm running at basically 80% of my maximum CPU processing power. This can be an issue as I start adding in more of these advanced algorithms and doing things like adding in transient recovery and that kind of stuff. Now what you can do to get around this is actually to print your audio tracks and then make all these other ones inactive. And that's what I've done to save time. I've already got it set up and printed it for you. But what I've done here is basically gone into these tracks, selected them. Instead of going to my main output here, I'm going to bus them over to something I call mix. All right, send them over to mix, and I've got the printed mix track right here. If I switch over to my timeline, all you have to do is basically make it record armed, and then print all these tracks with all the processing, including what's taking place on this master fader here with Ozone, all the modules up to the maximizer. I've printed all this processing and all the audio onto these two tracks right here. Then it's just a matter of going in, selecting all these right here, shift option clicking, making them all inactive. You'll watch what happens to my CPU. Now it goes down to close to 0%. All right. Next, once I've already got the audio printed for you, you can see right here, I'm just going to go in and turn on my Ozone plugin here, just the maximizer on my audio track. Now all my CPU can be devoted to processing the audio using the limiter in the master at the maximizer stage here. Let's get into some of the controls now of the plugin. To begin with, how you control the main output level is going to be set by the margin here. Now, right now it's at 0. That means 0 dB full scale. That means it's basically the loudest possible signal is what you're saying your limiter is going to possibly go up to, the loudest possible signal that can go through your digital to audio converter. Now, one of the things you have to worry about is what's called inter-sample detection, where it might cause the samples inside of your DAW to not go above a particular level, but then your digital to audio converter might actually try and create an analog signal that goes above that level, which can be a problem. So what I usually like to do is bring it down a little bit. You might be thinking, oh, you're actually bringing down the output level of the signal. Well, you can always make this up by using the threshold of the limiter to make sure that the overall signal is loud or perceived to be loud, but the peak is low enough so that it doesn't cause any digital to audio, digital to analog clipping. All right, so let's play it back and get into some of this.
Trouble bound.
Now looking over here at the meters, you can see that there are two things that you're watching. The peak level, and that's the level that's going to either cause clipping or not clipping at your digital to analog converter. And then the RMS level that's what's going to be more of the perceived level of loudness by the listener. So what you want is your peak level to be low enough that it's not causing any clipping, but your RMS level to be loud enough that it's right at the level of other comparable kinds of songs in this style of music. So for pop, rock, this country style, I'm going to be shooting for somewhere between -10 RMS up to about -8 for the loudest parts. Some people will go even beyond that. We are really squashing the track, bringing it up, but I want my track to breathe a little bit, so somewhere between around -9 is basically what I'm shooting for. The way that you can do that is by varying the threshold right here. All right, I'll bring it down and then show you how you can bring it up. Bring up the level of the track by bringing down the threshold.
Trouble bound, we hit the town.
So now the difference of my output is I've already brought up the RMS by about 5 dB. It was hovering around -15 here, and the input was at -20. So I'm actually going to switch over to the most advanced algorithm in here, the IRC3. I think this one is one of the best sounding, the most advanced one that they've got in their plugin. Then I'm going to bring it up the level of my signal so it's somewhere around -9.
Trouble bound, we hit the town. I'll never forget.
Now you're going to have to watch because my voice isn't actually going through the maximizer, so the levels are going to be a lot different now between the maximizer and what you're hearing on my voice. So another thing I'm going to play around with is how fast the limiter is going to respond. I actually want it to be a little bit faster because I want to make sure that there's no clipping that ever takes place. The slower I make it, it's going to bring up the level more and have more of a potential for clipping, but it might sound smoother. But what I'm going to do, I know I'm using a fast limiter, is I'm going to use some of this transient recovery. I'll play around with this and you can hear what it's doing. It's making sure that those things like the kick drum, the snare drum, and those hits aren't being completely destroyed by the limiter. Sounds like this.
Trouble bound, we hit the town. I'll never forget that sound. Tonight
Now to my ears, 75 sounded just about right for this transient recovery. It meant that everything still sounded natural, but made sure that my drums and everything were still very punchy. The last thing to add in here is a stereo link. That's to make sure that my stereo field doesn't get thrown off by using a limiter where one side gets compressed independent of the other one. And that's all there really is to it. As I've showed you in other videos, you can do things like automate some of these parameters to make it fit better with the different parts of the song. So if you were going to be very detailed, you could do that for different parts of the things like the verse and the chorus so that your RMS level is still somewhere hovering around -10 to -8. And that's right the level that you really want to watch for your track to be comparable to other songs you might hear on the radio. And that's all there really is to using the maximizer, at least the limiter section of the maximizer. In my next video, I'm going to move on to dithering. I'll discuss how you can use it to prepare your mix for 16-bit for a CD master. So stay tuned for that.